significantly, the taxes increases are going to finance sustainability of this country by maintaining 1,000 teachers in the classrooms, 9,300 health workers in their jobs, the employment of 800 community service doctors, and allow an additional 700,000 children of the age of 4 years to access early childhood development, which is necessary foundation education they need for a successful education journey. On economic growth, the 0.6% increase in the fourth quarter GDP for 2024 signals a recovery across the economy as the agriculture, finance, trade and household sectors grew in the last quarter of the year. The agricultural industry rebounded by 17.2%, lifting GDP growth by 0.4 of a percentage point. The finance, real estate and business services industry grew for an 8th consecutive quarter, with financial intermediary, real estate activities and other business services being the largest positive contributors to growth. Cabinet is confident that the increased focus and pace of delivery on economic structural reforms, improved service delivery and state capacity, and increased participation of the private sector will spur further growth of the economy in 2025 and beyond. On investments, Cabinet welcomed the announcement by Microsoft South Africa to invest 5.4 billion rands in artificial intelligence infrastructure in the country. This investment will strengthen South Africa's position as a leading artificial intelligence hub on the African continent and builds on Microsoft South Africa's 20.4 billion rands investment over the past 3 years. Microsoft South Africa has also announced their contribution to developing South Africa's digital literacy by paying for technical certification for 50,000 individuals in high-demand digital skills. In further uplifting our investment profile, Indian car manufacturer, Mahindra, signed a memorandum of understanding with the South Africa's Industrial Development Corporation, the IDC, to explore the possibility of setting up a full-scale vehicle assembly plant in South Africa. Mahindra already has an assembly plant of pickup range of vehicles in Durban, operated by AIH Logistics, where we recently celebrated the production of their 25,000 locally assembled pickup vehicles. Cabinet reminded every South African as direct shareholder in South Africa Incorporated of their vested interest in promoting our country's investment as an investment destination in a globally competitive environment. We must continue to speak with one voice in defense of our national interest, our sovereignty, and our constitutional democracy. On international relations, on South Africa's presidency of the G20, as part of its G20 presidency, South Africa successfully hosted the following G20 working groups and task force meetings during this month. The first is the first anti-corruption working group meeting, which took place in Cape Town on the 3rd to the 5th of March, which explored mechanisms to enhance the implementation of legal instruments to fight corruption. This meeting was an opportunity for participants to establish the agenda and lay the groundwork for future discussions, encouraging dialogue and collaboration to strengthen anti-corruption strategies. During this meeting, participants discussed and agreed on several key priorities, the three of them being: 1, strengthening public sector integrity; 2, increasing asset recovery efficiency; 3, inclusive participation; and the fourth one, whistleblower protection. The other meeting was the first agriculture working group meeting, which took place virtually on the 3rd and 4th of March, and this discussed critical issues that affect agricultural stakeholders worldwide and agreed on priorities for the year ahead. And these priorities are: 1, promoting inclusive market participation and food security; 2, empowering youth and women in agri-food systems; 3, fostering innovation and technology transfer; and 4, building climate resilience for sustainable agriculture. And also we held the first tourism working group meeting. It took place virtually. It was on the 5th of March, and it deliberated on how tourism can be used to change people's lives, communities, and the world. They also deliberated on and agreed to work on 4 priorities for the year, and these are: 1, people-centered artificial intelligence and innovation to enhance travel and tourism startups and SMMEs; 2, tourism financing and investment to enhance equality and promote sustainable development; 3, air connectivity for seamless travel; 4, enhanced resilience for inclusive, sustainable tourism development. We also held the first disaster risk reduction working group meeting. It also took place virtually on the 5th of March, and it discussed the acceleration of early warnings for all initiatives, which is a key global target set by the United Nations, and reinforced the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030. South Africa sees this meeting as a key international forum to drive the agenda of a shared responsibility to build resilience, strengthen our cooperation, and drive meaningful action that is needed to prevent an escalation or exacerbation of risk. The meeting agreed on the following priorities: 1, addressing inequalities and reducing vulnerabilities; 2, global coverage of early warning systems; 3, disaster resilient infrastructure; 4, financing for disaster risk reduction; 5, disaster recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction; and 6, ecosystems-based approaches for nature-based solutions. There was also a meeting of the first task force on food security, which was held virtually again on the 5th of March, and it discussed policies and programs to improve food security. Participants agreed to build a stronger, fairer, and more sustainable food system. They also committed to addressing key challenges like trade barriers, funding for food production, and the impact of climate change on food supply chains. Some of the priorities and outcomes, are: 1, strong food security policies; 2, stable food prices; 3, clear regulations and standards; 4, G20 action plan for food security; and 5, ministerial approval and implementation. Excuse me. The G20 outreach program held at the University of Witwatersrand on the 7th of March 2025 aimed at fostering wider public dialogue and participation in South Africa's G20 presidency. The gathering was used to encourage the people of this country to get involved in welcoming our guests to the country as we continue to host meetings in various parts of the country and to promote their culture and heritage. South Africans were also encouraged to tell the good story about their country. The following G20 working groups and task force meetings will take place until the end of March 2025. 1 is the first task force meeting on inclusive economic growth, industrialization, employment, and reducing inequality, which will take place on the 17th of March 2025 virtually. The first trade and investment working group meeting will take place on the 18th to the 20th of March 2025 virtually. The second health working group meeting will take place from the 26th to the 28th March 2025 in Durban. And the first climate and environment sustainability working group will take place from the 25th to the 28th March 2025 virtually. Information on these various meetings of the G20 and their outcomes can be accessed on www.g20.org or www.g20.org.za. On humanitarian aid to Palestine, Cabinet condemns the refusal of Israel to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip and its closure of border crossings at a time when the people of Gaza are experiencing immeasurable suffering and urgently need food, shelter, and medical supplies. This action is a continuation of Israel's use of starvation as a weapon of war as part of the ongoing campaign of what the International Court of Justice ruled to be plausible genocide against the Palestinian people. Cabinet reiterates our nation's call on the international community to hold Israel accountable and ensure the safe, continuous, and unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid to all areas of the Gaza Strip. On crime, welcoming the Malawi court ruling on the extradition of Mr. Shepard and Mrs. Mary Bushiri, Cabinet welcomed the ruling by the Republic of Malawi's Chief Resident Magistrate Court that Shepard and Mary Bushiri be extradited to South Africa to stand trial on multiple criminal charges, including rape, contravention of the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, the contravention of the Banking Act, and contravention of the Immigration Act, and violating their bail conditions, amongst others. This ruling shows that no one can run away from the rule of law, and also reaffirms the judicial independence, international cooperation, and mutual trust between the South African and Malawian legal institutions. We are aware that the Bushiris have indicated their intention to appeal. However, we are confident that we have a strong case against them, and South Africa stands ready to collaborate with Interpol to coordinate their transfer and logistics to ensure that they are brought to South Africa to stand trial. On severe weather, recent heavy rains have claimed several lives, left hundreds displaced, with homes and infrastructure severely damaged in KwaZulu-Natal. The impact of severe weather conditions in KwaZulu-Natal has been declared a national state of disaster to allow the Provincial Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, COGTA, to mobilize all organs of state to augment support measures, limit the impact of the disaster on communities. Government continues to provide flood victims with assistance, and the Department of Human Settlements has allocated 100 million rands to KwaZulu-Natal to assist to manage the aftermath of the floods. Cabinet calls on all South Africans to exercise extreme caution whenever there's inclement weather. Heavy rains pose a risk of localized flooding, particularly in low-lying area, bridges and roads. In cases of heavy rains, communities are urged to avoid flooded roads and to monitor news broadcasts, radio bulletins, and government official social media pages for real-time updates and alerts. On updates to Cabinet, on the protection and improvement of national minimum wage, Cabinet received and considered a report by the Department of Employment, Labour, and on the progress made to protect and enhance the national minimum wage. The National Minimum Wage Act, which was enacted in November 2018, laid the foundation for reducing income inequality and wage gaps and continues to safeguard low-income workers in the country. From the 1st of March 2025, the national minimum wage increased by 4% from 27 rands 58 cents to 28 rands 79 cents per hour. This increase aims to provide essential economic support and much-needed relief to the 6 million workers earning within the national minimum wage bracket. On promoting foundation learning, Cabinet expressed its support for the strategic reorientation of the basic education sector towards foundation learning. In January 2025, the Department of Basic Education announced and celebrated a record high matric pass rate of 87.4%. However, just a month earlier, the department had released systematic evaluation results from 3 different studies showing that nearly 80% of South African children cannot read for meaning in any language by the age of 10. To resolve this challenge, the Minister of Basic Education has initiated a strategic reorientation that will have the following initiatives. 1. Universal access to quality early childhood development through mass registration of ECD centers, ensuring each child in ECD receives a subsidy. This is the subsidy that was announced by the Minister of Finance, that is moving from 19 rands to 24 rands per child, and that is the first increase since 2019. And also to support ECD center with learning and teaching materials, and to offer support to practitioners to obtain teaching qualifications. The funding of this has also been allocated in the 2025 national budget, including to allow an additional 700,000 learners to access ECD or early childhood development learning. 2 is to review the norms and standards to increase teacher posts in the foundation phase teaching. And 3, that the Funza Rushaka bursary will be reoriented to prioritize bursaries to students who wish to teach in the foundation phase. 4, the strategic reorientation will strengthen foundational literacy and numeracy skills of learners and ensure that they later are able to table on the more complex subjects such as maths, science, accounting, economics, amongst others. On electricity generation performance, Cabinet received a report on the work undertaken by ESCOM to improve electricity generation and stabilization of the national grid to avert more incidents of load shedding. After the recovery of more than 300 megawatts of generation capacity and the replenishment of sufficient reserves, load shedding was suspended at 10 a.m. on Sunday, the 9th of March 2025. Coal operations at Kusile power stations are at optimal levels, with all units which were offline as of Friday, 7th March, are now successfully returned to service, and the Kubek Unit 2 was successfully brought back to service. The overall generation performance since the summer of 2024 has shown significant improvements and stability, resulting in 98% of load shedding free days. ESCOM remains optimistic for a positive outlook for the remainder of the summer period. On Cabinet decisions, hosting of the water and sanitation in Daba. Cabinet approved the hosting of the water and sanitation in Daba on the 27th to the 28th of March 2025 in Gauteng. This event serves as a follow-up to the Water Summit held in January 2024, which brought together all water services authorities to address key sector challenges following the release of the drop reports. The summit established an action plan to tackle the issues raised on the drop reports, and the Indaba will provide an opportunity to assess progress made and identify further steps needed. The expected outcomes of the Indaba are to have consensus on the state of water security in South Africa, progress on incomplete actions from the 2024 Water Summit, and key actions required to improve water security, and an updated or a new water action plan. Cabinet acknowledged the water security challenges facing the country and reaffirms its commitment to ensure that every South African has access to clean, safe, and sustainable water and sanitation services. United Nations second, third, and fourth period country report on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, abbreviated known as UNCRPD. Cabinet approved the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability submission of the second, third, and fourth UNCRPD periodic report to the UN. The report provides an update on the progress South Africa has made to promote and protect the rights of persons with disability. Cabinet approved the baseline country report on the implementation of the UNCRPD in 2013, and the report was subsequently deposited in 2014. This combined progress report gives an overview of government's performance in the implementation of the White Paper on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It highlights policy and legislative reforms and measures taken to protect and promote the rights of persons with disabilities. The report unpacks efforts in education, awareness raising, health, social services, access to justice, employment for persons with disabilities. The report will be published on the website of government, which is www.gov.za. On appointments, all appointments are subject to the verification of qualifications and the relevant security clearances. Cabinet approved the appointment of Mr. Neil Johnson as Deputy Director General, Human Resources Management and Development in the Department of Home Affairs. Cabinet concurred to the appointment of the Board of Directors of Alexco, and who are Ms. Dino P. Peter, who's the chairperson, Ms. Hilary A. Swartboy, Adjunct Professor Trevor G. Fowler, Ms. Shinzubi Zita, Ms. Poppy Ngishe, Dr. John Tsipa, Mr. Nico Patrick Swart, and Mr. Freddy Rasiete. Upcoming events: the inaugural National System of Innovation Transformation Summit. The inaugural National System of Innovation Transformation Summit will take place from the 13th to the 14th of March 2025, which is today to tomorrow, to harness South Africa's science, technology, and innovation capabilities in a manner that facilitates inclusion. The summit brings together science councils, higher education institutions, government departments, the business sector, and organized labor to reflect and engage on the current and future role of the country's national system of innovation. It will recommend actions to accelerate the realization of inclusive and sustainable socio-economic development for the benefit of all South Africans. The 8th South Africa European Union Summit. The 8th South Africa EU Summit will be co-chaired by President Ramaphosa and President of the European Council, Mr. Antonio Luis Santos da Costa, and the President of the European Commission, Dr. Ursula von der Leyen, it will take place in Cape Town today, the 13th of March 2025, to further strengthen the strong relations between South Africa and the EU. The summit will discuss issues of trade and investment, along with greater mutual cooperation and reinforced bilateral relations between South Africa and the EU. The summit is also expected to explore collaborative approaches to addressing regional and global challenges, including climate change, human insecurity, peace, security and stability, and the green transition and the reform of the global governance institutions. The summit will also reaffirm support for South Africa's G20 presidency and its priorities, including the theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainability. On messages of congratulations and condolences, on congratulations, Cabinet extended its congratulations and well wishes to Dylan Naidoo for becoming the first Black South African to win the prestigious SA Open, which is also one of the oldest golf championships. His victory has secured him a place in July's Open Championships at Royal Portrush. And to Ngazelo Mlilo on a nomination for 2 categories for the prestigious Women Changing the World Awards. The awards recognize women across the world who are doing incredible work in changing lives. And we send our well wishes to the Muslim community as they observe the holy month of Ramadan. On condolences, Cabinet expressed condolences to the friends and families of 31 passengers who lost their lives in 3 separate bus accidents between Reddersburg and Smithfield in the Free State, on the N2 North near Mandeni in KwaZulu-Natal, and then on the R21 in Ekurhuleni in Gauteng. The 4 primary school pupils who lost their lives in a road accident on the N12 in Davidton, Ekurhuleni in Gauteng. The whistleblower and gender activist Pamela Mabini, who stood up for women who experience gender-based violence and ensured that the perpetrators of GBVF are brought to book. South African actor and presenter Crystal Dawn Roberts. She starred in films such as The Endless River and Crotter, and featured in Arendse Vlei, Swartwater and Sevendeland. To Dr. Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, anti-apartheid and black consciousness activist, medical doctor and author who was an active promoter of African languages. He received the Multilingualist Award from the Pan South African Language Board for promoting the use of indigenous languages in South African literature. To well-renowned actor, novelist and playwright Athol Fugard, who was recognized both locally and internationally for his outstanding contributions to theater. In 2001, he was inducted into the America Theatre Hall of Fame and received South Africa's Order of Ikhamanga in 2005. To the award-winning comedian, actor and writer Ebenezer Dibakwane, and to the family and friends of Khumbudzo Jacob Makwetla, who was an advocate for black business empowerment, who also contributed to the development of football and boxing in this country. May their souls rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the post-cabinet statement. Let me take this opportunity to acknowledge, also joining the Minister at the front, Ms. Nomonde Mnokwa, the acting DG of GCIS. The drill will be the same. We'll start with questions here at Mbizo in Cape Town, then we'll take the questions online. Let me recognize your hand, and then note you in that order.
Good morning, Jan Gert, News 24. Minister, this budget will likely probably not pass through Parliament. This will obviously have an impact on government. Did the Cabinet consider the possibility of this budget not passing? and mitigating measures that the government can take. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerber.
Thank you, Minister. Alviwe from ENCA. This is just a bit difficult to accept that Cabinet accepted the budget itself, given what we're seeing playing out before and after the budget, where we're seeing the two biggest political parties within the Government of National Unity itself pulling apart, saying different statements. One won't even support the budget. What's been happening since the February 19th budget that never sat? Were you working together as part of the Government of National Unity? Because it doesn't look like there's unity at this moment within the GNU itself. And do you have a mechanism, perhaps, to deal with disputes? In fact, it seems like you don't at this stage. Are we safe, in South Africa, in the hands of the Government of National Unity? And maybe lastly, what really happened within Cabinet? Because we're hearing different ministers speaking different things that happened. For example, the finance minister suggesting that the DA had its own propositions to the president that it wanted to put forward and would only agree to the budget in that sense. Reiterated by Minister Gwetematashe, where he even went to mention the Expropriation Act, the Bella Act that maybe the DA tabled, while we're hearing different sentiments from the DA that suggested that they didn't even want the VAT increase. So what really happened? Can we take the country into confidence on the issues that were proposed around the budget itself? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Munilani from SABC, just a quick one, Minister. Is there an indication when will the President dispatch an envoy to the U.S. to actually deal with the trade tensions with Washington? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me check with Liesel if we have any question online.
No, let's deal with this one.
Okay. Thank you very much. Minister, the questions have been asked.
Thank you for the questions. I think we need to, I've always maintained that cabinet discussions are confidential. But there comes a time when you need to give context to the process and that was followed. And I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow of the discussions in cabinet, but we'll give you context so that we can all understand. Maybe let me start there. So if you recall, on the 19th of February, Cabinet had a special meeting to consider the proposal of the budget since before it was tabled in Parliament. And as a result, we then agreed to request a postponement of that budget. But maybe what's important is that I must give you what happens to prepare to get to that budget process. And because we just don't wake up and say, this is the budget, this is the, then take it. There's a process that is prescribed by the PFMA, the Public Finance Management Act, in terms of preparing the budget, and there are committees that are set up by the PFMA to prepare for the presentation of the budget. One of that process is what we call the Ministers' Committee on the Budget, colloquially known as the MINCOMBAD. And that committee sits before we even go to the medium-term budget policy statement and then agree on a number of things. So I'm going to give you some timelines. Or maybe let me give you what the MINCOMBAD does. The MINCOMBAD considers and advises Cabinet on budget allocations to be included in the national budget, in the MTF and the Division of Revenue Framework. It also considers matters related to the determination of expenditure allocations, including the economic assumptions underpinning the budget and the fiscal policy framework. And it also recommends items of unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure to be included by the Minister of Finance in the national adjustment budgets in terms of the PFMA. And this MINCOM BAD includes ministers who are responsible for some of the major spending departments and central to coordination of ministries that are represented. And I can give you the ministries if you intend. You don't want the ministries that are involved as part of the MINCOM BAD, or should I share that detail? I need an indication. You want the detail. Okay. In terms of the ministers of the MINCOM BAD that are appointed in the 7th administration, is the Minister of Finance, who's the co-chairperson, the Minister in the Presidency, the Minister for Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, the Minister for Basic Education, the Minister of Electricity and Energy, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, the Minister of Health, the Minister of Human Settlements, the Minister of the Public Service and Administration, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, the Deputy Minister of Finance, and the Deputy Ministers of Finance, because it's 2 of them. Those are the people who work with National Treasurer and the Minister of Finance to prepare the budget. And the President and the Deputy President also, the President takes over the chairing of MINCOM BAD at particular instances so that we can then finalize the budget. And to prepare for this budget, including the MTBPS, MINCOM BAD and the Treasury Committee met twice outside the induction period. That's the MINCOM BAD. We met on the 14th of October 2024, and also we met again on the 28th of January 2025, because we had previously met to consider the budget, to be inducted, to say what happens, because some ministers we knew. And what are the key issues that those 2 meetings considered? The 2 meetings considered the latest economic outlook, the latest fiscal framework, and the revenue estimates, and the medium-term fiscal outlook, and the fiscal strategy of the country, to say how we're moving and what is happening. And we then, after the MINCOM BAD met, the Treasury then prepared a report for a special cabinet meeting which dealt with the MTBPS, the medium-term budget policy statement, on the 18th of October. And we also met, there was also a presentation of the budget outlook on the 29th of January at the Cabinet Lekutla. And this presentation included the macroeconomic framework and the fiscal outlook, saying what are the funding challenges, what are the expenditure outlook, what are all those things that were considered in funding the budget. And then on the 5th of February, there was a cabinet meeting that considered the budget, and there was a special cabinet meeting on the 19th that considered the budget. And if you park that process building up to the 19th, what then happens post the 19th? As we had agreed on the meeting of the 19th of February, is that there must be a direct engagement around the budget. We met on the 24th of February and then the 3rd of March. On the 24th of February, we met and gave us proposals of what should be considered. But on that meeting of the 24th of February, the proposals that were coming through were both medium to long term. But the issues with the budget is that the budget had to be funded. So you can't say we are going to collect more revenue through SARS, the tax collections of 42 billion rands, and therefore we should not fund, because that's going to come in the future. But the budget has to be funded from the 1st of April. So we met, we then had those discussions, both medium term, and the President set up a team of ministers that was chaired by the Deputy President to go and consider those options that came from the discussions of the ministers and give us proposals to as cabinet to consider and then assist the Minister of Finance with direction of which of the options are being taken. We then met on this again on a special cabinet meeting of the 3rd of March. Why the last meeting was the 3rd of March is because there are a number of things that National Treasury has to do before finalizing the budget, and they indicated that if Cabinet can finalize its own decisions by the 4th of March, they'll be able to ready themselves to present the budget on the 12th of March. So we met, and I'm not going to go on the options that were there, but there were 5 options that were tabled. All of us, with no exception, we agreed on the options that were being tabled. And the options that were being tabled, there was no option that did not have some sort of form of a VAT increase. And we said, given that all the options have the VAT increase, we are then mandating National Treasury to then consider what is the best option that does three things. One, maintain the fiscal discipline and the fiscal framework, because it's important. It's important because now we're starting to reduce our debt servicing costs. The debt is going to start to stabilize. We are registering a primary fiscal what do you call it? Forgot the term. But that progress cannot be undermined. We said, two, it must also fund growth. It must make sure that it has those allocations that will spur economic growth and participations of South Africans in line with the priorities of the 7th administration that is led by the Government of National Unity. The third one, we said it must mitigate the impact on the poor and the middle class, because we understand the impact that is having on the middle class. And that is the mandate we then gave to National Treasury. And we went away, and then there were meetings of the presidents and leaders of the political parties who were in the GNU and so forth, and those engagements. And we released a statement on the 3rd of March indicating cabinet consensus around the budget and that the options are left to the National Treasury to finalize. And why cabinet could not say do this, the Treasury has to run the numbers, but PFMA is very specific. The Minister of Finance and the National Treasury must then decide on what is going to be done, and that is provision of the PFMA. I just forgot the clause. I can find the clause for you and read it out for you, and you can go to the PFMA and find that allocation. And I'm taking you through this whole process so that you understand where we are. Then when we went to the meeting, and this was not a special cabinet, it was a normal cabinet. But as norm, when you're going to present, when the minister is going to present, or finance is going to present the budget to the National Assembly, you don't want ministers to hear the budget for the first time with everybody else. Though we don't go into detail to say this X amount is going to be expended on this, for instance, I will not know of my 5 departments, which I will not have known which are the allocations we're getting outside of the letter of allocations that are sent to departments to say this is the letter, this is what we're allocating. But given that there had to be a revision, the letters of allocation that were sent previously had to be withdrawn so that Treasury can rework the numbers and determine the allocations. So when we went to that meeting, the National Treasury presented, and majority of members of cabinet, which is sufficient consensus. Remember, we don't vote in cabinet, which is sufficient consensus. Raised there, I said we are happy with what Treasury has done. They've listened to us, and that's why there's no 2% VAT increase. But also on measures to mitigate the budget, and I can rehash them again as we've indicated there on the budget to mitigate the impact on the poor and the middle class. We had that. But what became apparent in that discussion is that the things that are being brought into the discussion of the budget are things that are not related to the budget. And you cannot hold the country ransom on the budget because you've got other political things to deal with. And we have tabled the budget as the cabinet, as we are required by the PFMA, to the National Assembly. And as the Speaker has announced, the National Assembly has referred the budget to the various committees of the National Assembly to deliberate. They must be given space to deliberate and scrutinize that budget, and they will work with National Treasury and the Minister of Finance. They'll ask questions, and they'll be explained the context and the assumptions that were used. But it's up to the National Assembly to decide how they want to fund the government programs. Remember, the National Fiscus or the National Revenue Fund, it's funds that are given to us by the electorate or by South Africans. And we hold that in custody, but the National Assembly, as elected representatives of Parliament, have the responsibility to make sure that the funding goes to the right things. Even the funding instruments are correct, and they have the duty to do the analysis. They can either do two things. They can amend the budget, or they can send it back to the cabinet to be reworked completely with indicators of what they want to see. But that's the deliberation that goes to the National Assembly. As cabinet or the National Executive, we have done our part. We have tabled the budget as required by the law, and we have tabled within the framework provided for by the law. Because in terms of the PFMA, we are required to table the budget in the National Assembly before the first of each financial year, which is the 1st of April 2025 this year. And in terms of what happens if the budget is not approved in terms of government funding, the PFMA provides for funding mechanism. We use the old budget that was done in that was approved in the previous financial year to then work until a new budget is passed, because the legislatures foresaw that implication, and it's not new. You see that in the US every day. When there's an emergency budget, emergency funding for particular things. It happens in other jurisdictions. It's just that now our constitutions and our constitution and our various legislation are now being tested whether they are robust and agile enough, and they are indeed robust and resilient enough, and they made for mitigation of this type of circumstances. So I've dealt with the first two questions that relates to the budget. In terms of when are we sending the envoy to the US, like I've indicated in the last post-cabinet briefing, we'll announce when we send. As government, we are busy meeting with, for instance, today we are meeting with the EU, and part of the envoys. Remember, we're not sending the envoys to the US alone. We're sending envoys to all major capitals of the world. So we are meeting with the EU so that we can engage and on our way forward and how to deal with global challenges, how to deal with our own trade relations, how to grow our own economies, how to cooperate on matters of mutual interest, as we indicated in the statement. We also have an ambassador in Washington who is busy engaging with the US administration in one form or the other. So it's not like we are not engaging as government. And as the president was responding to questions on Tuesday, he indicated his continuous interaction with the various players in the USA. So we continue to acknowledge the US as a strategic partner of trade, but we have other partners that we are engaging. We'll announce in due course when we send the envoy. So don't worry about the rush or pity of DA, AfriForum, and whatever. There are still people who need to explain whether they can take leave of absence from themselves and act with one head and take off the other head. So don't worry about that pity and traffic. Sometimes you rush too early and you get tripped up. So sometimes it's better to relax. And we like our relaxing mode and our calm approach. But we continue to interact. Remember, the US sent representatives both to the foreign ministers G20 meeting and also to the finance ministers G20 meetings. So we are engaging. So don't stress too much about the engagements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was informative, educational, but also very helpful. Let's check the questions online. My colleague Liesel Sef will lead us there.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Liesel Sef, and on behalf of the GCIS team, we'll be doing the online questions today. Good day, Minister. This is Chidi Medea from Eyewitness News. This is regarding the GNU's disagreement over the budget. Seemingly it is over the VAT increase. However, the DA has raised expropriation as a major concern, that it scares off investors. Can you, Minister, reflect on this and whether the DA's demand for a U-turn on expropriation will be entertained? Thank you. That was the only question.
Thank you very much. Minister, there is just one question burning. I think we can take it from in-house.
My name is Arthur from Hartlepool.
You can press the button. Thank you.
My name is Arthur from Hartlepool. Minister, has Cabinet been briefed about the process to migrate from SASSA to Post Bank? There have been problems regarding this process, and Minister of Social Development came out. It's known that she's not happy about the process. Has the Cabinet been briefed, and is Cabinet monitoring the process before the deadline of the 20th comes to an end next week?
Thank you very much. Minister, I was about to say that was the last question, but I see there is a Benny hand also that side.
Thanks, Maruja. My name is Joseph Musia from JTP Media. Minister, on the issue of the President spoke about it during Q&A on Tuesday, the issue of our troops in the DRC. Is Cabinet being kept abreast on that particular situation? Are our soldiers able to, if they wanted to come home, or if the government wanted to bring them home, are we in a situation where, or are they trapped by M23 and we are unable to extract them?
Thank you very much, Minister. These then were the last questions that we have. I don't see any other hand. Do you want the last bite on that? Oh, short.
Thank you. It's Milani once again. Minister, I don't want to make assumptions, but in your statement or in your answer just now, you're saying that the opposition parties, in their opposition to the budget, were raising issues that are unrelated to the budget. Could you perhaps elaborate what were those unrelated issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Minister, I think you would also then close the press briefing. And thank you very much, please.
Just pardon me, I wanted to give you the clauses around the responsibility of the Minister of Finance in terms of the PFMA. They are contained in the PFMA section, PFMA section 5, it starts at subsection 2 and then section 6. Those are the responsibility of the Minister of Finance and National Treasury as it relates to the budget. The PFMA is very specific on what they should do and what is their responsibility. That cannot be usurped by anybody else. And maybe before I even start, let me also, what we had omitted, is to congratulate Dr. Patrice Motsepe for his re-election unopposed as the President of the Confederation of the African Football, which he is serving his second term. And he has done well on behalf of all of us South Africans in terms of lifting the standard and the status of CAF, and we continue to be proud of his efforts of uplifting football and the other works that he does in our country and in the continent. Let me start on the issue of the SASSA grants. In the last cabinet briefing, which was on the 27th, we indicated that Cabinet received a brief from the Cabinet meeting of the 26th of February. Cabinet received a brief and an update on the migration of of SASSA grant recipients from the SASSA card to the Postbank Black Card. And given the challenges that were, that's why the deadline was extended. At that point, we indicated the number of beneficiaries who have already collected their cards, the black cards, and encouraged the others to go. We also announced measures to increase a number of sites that the black cards can be collected, including the Spar retailers, additional service points at the post offices, and at your Boxers and other retailers. That details there. The responsibility to monitor that migration lies with the Department of Social Development and the Minister concerned and the Deputy Minister, and they will continuously update Cabinet. It's not the Cabinet that does the monitoring. And then let me deal with the issue around the troops in the DRC. Of course, Cabinet has been kept abreast, but as we speak, as we are sitting now, there is a SADC meeting of summit that is considering recommendations on the matter of our troops in the Eastern DRC, not our troops only, the SADC troops. As a country, we've committed that we didn't send ourselves there. We were invited by the Democratic Republic of Congo as part of the SADC contingents. That's why it's SAMI DRC. So the decisions about our troops, whether we bring them back home or they remain, will be dependent on the SADC decisions, and we are fully participating in the SADC decisions, whether at Troika level as part of the troop contributing countries. And we do this because we have always argued that the solution to the situation in the Eastern DRC is a political solution that gets a dialogue. As we stand, there's not only a SADC resolution on the need for dialogue between state and non-state actors, and also the mediation process, but there's also a SADC East African Community decision. There's the African Union resolution. There's the United Nations resolutions that talks of the cessation of hostilities, which is immediate, the negotiations and participation in the negotiations of both state and non-state actors, and there are appointed or designated mediators of peace facilitators in that process. And if we remind you of the decision to merge both the Nairobi and Luanda process to the Luanda-Nairobi process under the leadership of President Lorenzo of Angola and former President Kenyatta of Kenya, so that we can then move everyone into the negotiating table. As the President has clarified, the ceasefire is holding for now. And yes, the situation, there can never be a situation that is easy. It's precarious for everyone concerned, but we continue to participate in the SADC initiated and driven process, and will take the decisions together with SADC. And let me deal with the issue around the question that was asked about the Expropriation Act, and whether that the DA is now demanding the amendment of the Expropriation Act, and whether Cabinet will do a U-turn on the Expropriation Act. And it links to the question of opposition parties. It's not opposition parties, it's opposition party. It's not even opposition party. It's a party within the GNU. It's the DA who themselves, through their leader, announced that they are not supporting the budget because they have an issue with the Expropriation Act. Maybe let me start here. The DA has taken the Expropriation Act to court. So in simple terms, we need to wait for the court. You can't run two simultaneous processes. You choose a process, you must allow that process to conclude. And when that process is concluded, then you come back to another process, maybe. But the first part, the claim by the DA, the Expropriation Act has nothing to do with the budget. The Expropriation Act is part of the redress agenda of this country that seeks to make sure that South Africans, majority in particular, who were denied access to land and property because of the apartheid regime, can then have redress. And that Expropriation Act, as we have indicated, and the President has indicated when he addressed the Joburg, the meeting with stakeholders in Johannesburg, to introduce the Presidential Johannesburg Working Group, he indicated that we'll use that Expropriation Act to expropriate abandoned buildings in Johannesburg that are now literally crime scenes and slums that continue to trap our people in poverty, so that we can then use them through either government and private sector investment into social housing and other amenities that would be useful. Because the Expropriation Act is also beneficial for improving or unlocking development for our people. But the demand by the DA, as articulated by their leader, Mr. John Steenhuisen, after the post-cabinet briefing, indicates that there are issues with VAT, and by the way, there was no dispute on the 3rd of March. Their issue with VAT has nothing to do with their interest in protecting the poor. Their issue with VAT is because they are always interested in making sure that we don't achieve the transformation gains this country has set themselves to. It's about politics. It's about the Bila Act that seeks to make sure that children have access to schooling and better in the areas where they reside. It's about Bila that makes sure that children can have access to early child development learning. It's about NHI that demands that all South Africans must have access to basic and quality health care. It's about those gains that have been registered that they want to reverse. And to reverse those, they will start with the Expropriation Act. So South Africans should not be fooled that when the DA says they're opposing a VAT increase. No, everybody had signed on the VAT increase. And say, let's mitigate, let's get the growth things. And those things that we said must be done have been done. But now the DA wants to hold the country in ransom because they want to reverse the gains of the Expropriation Act that reverse the fundamental sin to the struggle of a free South Africa. Remember, the struggle of a free South Africa was waged on the basis of access to land and the denial of the majority to access land. And that is fundamental. That question, the land question, must be addressed fundamentally in this country. And the DA are fully aware that our implementation of the Expropriation Act will abide by the provisions of this Constitution. We are a government that has always upheld the principles and objectives of our Constitution. And even if people say you may stray, but there have always been courts in these countries that have demonstrated their independence and the protection of the Constitution, because we are a constitutional democracy. The Constitution in the Republic of South Africa reigns supreme. So the DA opposition to the budget is not about VAT increases. It's about reversing the gains of transformation. It's about anti the poor. It's anti the middle class. It's about reversing the Expropriation Act. And it's a pity that they've got the megaphones and they've got the scribes who can make their voices very loud. But they're true, and they've come out and said it themselves. It's not me, it's John Steenhuisen yesterday when he did a post-budget interview to say their issue is with the Expropriation Act. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day. And we'll look forward to see you at the EU South Africa Summit.
No, Sister, we like them when they're on. You know what happened? That time when we were today, this thing was removed. Then we connected to his. Yes. Then we connected to